Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Joining us today is Dr. Al Kertz, and our topic is that of pair-housed dairy calves, heat stress, and whether to ventilate or not. For those of you that are joining us here today, we want to thank you for tuning in. And if you have any questions for Dr. Kertz as we work through our presentation here today, be sure to post those there in your chat on your screen. Joining us from social media, post those directly in your channel. So Dr. Kertz, great to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be back.
So now you actually, speaking of being back, you just got back from Florida where the American Dairy Science Association had their annual meeting and ARPAS had their annual meeting, and you lead up ARPAS. So give us some insight. Give us the hot topics that our audience needs to be aware of. What was going on down there in Florida?
Well, ARPAS had a symposium and jointly sponsored by the Growth and Development Committee of ADSA. And it has three topics that I think people who are interested in this area will find in particular interest. One was what happens and when, and best as we can tell why, cows sometimes don't have colostrum. They just don't yield colostrum. That's one subject. Another one is why is it so often, too often, traumatic for calves to be weaned? And the third one is a major database, which will take some further work to sort through it. What is the impact of age at first calving on subsequent milk production? And what is the impact of difficulty of calving on production? Those areas all need some enlightenment. So those presentations will be published in the near future in the ARPAS journal. So people can look forward to that.
Sounds like some interesting topics. We have an interesting topic here today. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you get into that. And likewise, we're going to be posting Al's column there in the chat. So if you want to look through that, you can as well.
Yes, it's that time of the year when it gets hot and humid, and calves don't do as well during that period of time, although that's not well studied until more recently. Cows don't do well. One of the reasons why is because they have the heat of rumen fermentation. So in order to reduce that, they eat less. And calves can do that too, but until their starter intake gets high, that's usually not much of a factor. The factor is that when it gets above about 77 degrees Fahrenheit, or even lower than that, calves will go through some heat stress. And so that's a problem. And how do calves cope and what can we do to help them? That's really what led to this subject. Another study was done at the University of Wisconsin. I've covered a couple of those over the last year or so. And in this case, it's looking at another factor in addition is how do pair-housed calves versus non-pair-housed calves do in ventilated or not ventilated hutches during the summer? Now, we don't think Wisconsin is necessarily being hot, but we know from the cow studies that when the temperature humidity index, THI, gets over 70, that's heat stress for cows. And there's good evidence that's also true for calves. So in this study, they looked at this at the University of Wisconsin facility in which they had calves. Let's see, there were 50 some calves in this study, and they fed them colostrum within 6 hours, and then they limited so they didn't get really big calves outside 2 standard deviations, but they had a select population of heifer calves of about 50. And then there were 2 treatments. One was pair-housed hutches. So they joined them in such a way that the calves could go to either one of the 2 hutches, 2 calves, 1 in each hutch. And then they had a single hutch calf. And then, of course, those hutches, this can vary, but those hutches had 2 areas down low where they could be opened, and then a bigger area on the back on the upper side, which could be opened and propped open for use of adding bedding, but also for ventilation purposes. So those were the methods by which they could ventilate the hutches. The pair-housed calves and hutches were fed, some pasteurized colostrum, pasteurized waste milk, and they were also provided a starter and water. What I found interesting is in this description of the study, the water bucket was outside the hutch and the starter bucket inside. That is great for two reasons. One is it keeps calves from slopping back and forth water and starter and starter and water, which reduces their intake of both. And the other one is it keeps the starter from getting wet if it rains. Certainly it doesn't snow in the wintertime, in the summertime, but in the wintertime, it can be another problem. Although I noticed they said the water bucket, which was outside, was black. Now, something to consider when the sun is really hot and you got a black water bucket, the water may be too hot for the calves to drink. So you go by and you look and you see there's water in the bucket for the calves. You think it's okay, but stick your hand in there or your finger in there, you might find out it's too hot for the calves to drink. So a little practical problem that can occur. So the calves then were fed different amounts of the pasteurized waste milk, and they had a step down weaning program, and then they monitored what was happening for periods of time. So if we look at the first table, this is from May to September in 2019, and notice the air temperature, the mean was 69.3 degrees. So you look at that and you say, well, that's not bad, so there shouldn't be a problem, but the standard deviation is 5.6 degrees. And look at the range from about 57 to 82 degrees. So in addition, look at the second line, relative humidity, 78%, plus or minus 8%, and a range from about 60 up to 80. So when you have that high a humidity, even when the temperature is not so high, the temperature humidity index is higher. That's what you'll notice in the third line. So from the mean was about 67, 68, but the range went all the way up to 79. And at about 70 and above is heat stress for calves, as it is for cows. So you can tell that during the heat of the day, that is very likely these calves are undergoing heat stress, even though the average in mean may be relatively low. There's some cooling down at night. But when the humidity is higher, it's also more difficult for the calf to handle that, just like we don't like heat and humidity together as well. So now if we look at table 2, we have some data from inside the hutch, which was ventilated, or inside the hutch, which was not ventilated. So they had a period of time where they restricted the calves in the hutch for about an hour so that they knew for sure that they were in the hutch, and that wasn't another variable. So if we look at the temperature before they restricted the calves in the hutch, the average was right at 80 degrees. So that's warm. And yet when it was non-ventilated, the hutch, it was almost 83. So you have about 3 degrees difference. So that tells you that the ventilation was beneficial for the calves in this study. Now, they did it in different periods of time. So week 4, week 6, and week 9. So if you look at week 4, it was 80 inside and 84 outside. So a 4-degree difference. Week 6, it was 83 and a half, 87.6, about that 4-degree spread. And week 6 would have been, I believe, around August. And then week 9 got to be about the end of August or September. So you can see the temperature is lower now, 77 and a half inside, but almost 80 outside. So that says that at least 2 of those months, it was even worse because towards the end of August in Madison, Wisconsin area, you're going to have some cooler nights and shorter days, and that starts reducing the degree of heat stress that the calves would go through. There were some other measurements made as well. A week of life, of course, a week of the study was a factor in the temperature humidity index. They did respiration rate because that's a good thing that you can do to measure how much heat stress calves are under. And then when calves came out of the ventilated hutches, they had a reduction in the respiration rate of about 14 and a half per minute. So that says that even when the calves were in ventilated hutches and they came outside, they reduced their respiration rate. So there was less heat outside, depending on the temperatures between the inside and outside within an hour. And then there was a lesser reduction in respiration rate during the 1 hour restriction when they were kept in the hutches. In addition, they measured an eye temperature instead of a rectal temperature, and that data, while we're not shown, they found that the calves within that 1 hour restriction time did not show much of a stress due to temperature, their body temperature through the eye temperature. Now, if we look at this figure 1, interesting in how the calves allocated their time. So week 4 and 6 would have been the hottest weeks. So if you look at week 4, those that in a ventilated area, 30% of their time they were observed to be in the ventilated hutch, and let's see, 30 up to 70, that's about 40% were in the non-ventilated, or they were outside. So if you take that middle bar, the orange, you see that that was generally greater for the non-ventilated hutch calves than the blue one. And as the weeks went on to week 9, when it starts to get cooler, then the time they spent in the ventilated hutch was even greater than the other one. Now, a couple of things about their pair housing. You know, calves, like cows, are herd animals. There's a term for it. I can't remember the name of it, something like mimetic. And it means they all want to do the same thing at the same time. So they're very social animals. And within a herd, there's always a dominance level. And so while cows want to do the same thing at the same time, they won't do it unless the lead cow or the lead animal does it first. So here you only have 2 animals. You don't get as much into that social dominance. But we found that the calves preferred to be together when they were in the pair housed area, even if it meant they were a bit hotter, because they have this kind of dilemma. Do I do my herd social get together with my pair, or do I stay apart when I might be a little bit cooler? So in this case, it looks like they were getting together even though they were a little bit warmer. I saw that evidence in herd behavior a few years ago when I was in a cow project in Uganda. There were some heifers in a pasture area. There was no water there. And so when they opened the gate to let the heifers out into an area where there was a big concrete water trough, there was not room for all of them to be at the water trough at the same time. So, of course, the lead animals all march around the water trough and get their drink. And then when they're finished, they leave. But now those heifers that didn't get around the water trough at the same time have a dilemma. Do they stop and take a drink and not follow the rest of the herd right away? Or do they simply forego drinking and follow the rest of the herd of heifers? They follow the rest of the herd of heifers. It's very dramatic what happened. I was even a bit surprised by that. But sometimes we have to understand the group behavior and dominance, and that calves, like cows, like to get together. And if you got a group of calves, you're going to have group behavior. So you want to make sure that they can get to the water at the same time, or individually, separately, or that there's adequate bunk space for the calves.
That's pretty interesting that they would, actually give up a drink of water to
Yeah,
to follow along, to stay with that herd.
go
And
with
I
the
would
herd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right? And it's interesting too. I mean, I would think even just a couple degrees would make a difference, right? In one of those
yeah,
hutches, it
yeah.
can and really make a difference on that heat level of heat stress, and probably having two animals in there, just more body heat as well. So it causes higher temperatures. Am I on target with any of that?
Yeah, and I think even when there was a benefit for the ventilated temperature being lower, the other benefit is the air is moving.
Mm.
And so that would help as well. I saw an extreme case. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I was in Thailand one time on a large dairy, a well built, well managed dairy. They had tunnel ventilated calf barn. So you got
Mm.
a series of fans on one end and louvers open the other end. And you pull air throughout the day and night. And the problem was the calves weren't doing as well. But when I got into the building, I think I figured out why, because the calves were in metal stalls that were open all around, that had no bedding, no flooring, and then the speed of the fan was so great that it was almost ruffling their hair on their coat. So I said, I think you're overdoing it. Why don't you cut back the speed of the fan? And I think the calves will get the benefit of the air moving without the stress of too much air moving.
Too much ventilation. There's another
Yeah,
issue, right?
right. Not very often. Yeah.
Right. So then, what's as we always like to say, what's the bottom line in all of this, Dr. Kurtz?
Well, calves like to pair up. They like to be together, so that can be beneficial to them. But if that's the case, then I think ventilation is even more important, because they will lie next to each other, and that could increase their own body temperature a little bit. So you want to make sure that you've got a well ventilated hutch system, particularly if calves are in uh, uh, in a pair, in a group, and that heat stress is increased when you have higher humidity. So even though in the northern climates in the US we don't think of heat stress, the higher humidity along with higher temperatures during the daytime is going to create heat stress in calves, just like it does for cows.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insight and for joining us here today. We look forward to your next update in, I guess it would be July.
Yes, July's coming pretty quickly.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to thank all of you for tuning in as well. We know you have busy schedules, so giving us a little bit of your day and your time is much appreciated. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 sessions are available in on-demand format on feedstuffs.com. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.